Okay, here we are, the Welsh Game of Thrones, which we expanded to the full British Game of Thrones, and we're talking about the bloodthirsty period that was the 6th century. Strangely referred to as Dark Ages sometimes, and there's so much information, it really is a mystery as to where that name came from. But anyway, before we go on to invaders and other races and all that kind of stuff, let's first of all concentrate on the two main houses of the Cymric, or the Welsh as they're now known. So, the first one, the main house in southeast Wales, based in Glamorgan and Gwent, is the House of Bran. And at this stage, as we come into the 6th century, into the 500s, Tudrig is still the patriarch. And, of course, he'll be the father to Meurig, who becomes the next king. But he also has a daughter called Gwerthla, who has a son called Ithdyd, who goes into the church, and we shall come back to him later, because he has a further role to play in this story. Okay, so Tudrig's more famous son is Meurig, who is the king of this area, and of course the father of Arthur. Let's move these across a bit. Arthur. And amongst his other sons and children, he has Idnith, Paul, who probably became Saint Paulinius, Frioch, another brother, Anna as a sister, Afrethla, and Gwyar, who also comes into this story quite significantly in a minute. So this is our generation of the House of Bran. Now, we can take some of these out straight away. Anna marries and her sons go into the church. Afrethla marries, her sons go into the church and they play no further part in this. Paul, as we said, probably St. Paulinius, he also goes into the church and he takes no further part in this. So we are left with this situation. Now, the other main house is the House of Cole, and by this stage, it's now headed by Cynmarc, or Cynfachur, and amongst other children, he has a daughter called Arawn, a son called Urien, or Urbgen, and a son, Llyw. Llyw marries Gwyar, bringing the two houses together. So effectively, these guys are in the north of England, and that's the area, Northumbria and south of Scotland, the northern part of the British. These are in southeast Wales. And there are other kingdoms which will come into the Game of Thrones later, such as Powys in North Wales, and various other people, Maelgwyn, people like that. But for now, we're going to concentrate on these two houses. So this is the situation we have it. Arthur takes a wife, Gwynevere, or Guinevere as she becomes known, the first, because he has more than one wife, and that's very important. But at this stage, that's his wife. We'll just move him slightly. Guinevere. And they have a son, Nawi. Nawi, who's supposed to be wonderful, called the Glittering, the Glass. This magnificent son, who's going to be the successor and lead the British Empire into the future. Because at this stage, just to explain quickly, Tudrig is passing on, but Meurig is still here. And the thing with Meurig, and the way the British did things, you do not wait till you die to hand power over. Meurig seems to be injured quite early in his life, and he hands over a lot of, particularly the fighting and the armies, to his son Arthur, who at a very young age, possibly 15, was already in charge of the armies. The British Empire is made up of a number of kingdoms, and within those kingdoms then you had to choose someone to be the High Commander, or the Uther Pendragon, to run the armies and fight the wars if there was a common threat. Meurig had been an Uther Pendragon, and so had Tudrig and Taithfallt. So that is a title rather than a name, although there was someone with a similar name hundreds of years earlier, but that's something different. So for now, we have the situation, Arthur running the armies, he's got his wife, he's got his heir, we've got brothers, and a cousin lurking around there, and things are looking okay for the dynasty. Gwyar, and Llyw, they have possibly other children, but the two significant ones are the very famous Medrawd, who becomes known as Mordred. And be aware there's more than one Mordred as well. And we also have Gwalchmai, who becomes better known as Sir Gawain in the Green Knight stories. So as you can see from this, they are the nephews of Arthur. But they are still part of this northern dynasty, so they're not going to be inheriting before Nawi. Now, in 547, 548, there is an invasion, which we'll go to on another video. And during this time, Nawi, we believe, is supposed to be out leading a scouting party, or something like that, observing the enemy, raiding the land. But he gets a bit carried away, disobedient, and possibly starts some sort of battle, and unfortunately he is killed. Now some of the records talk about Arthur killing him, which seems very unlikely. If that happened, that would be huge news and a big part of the legends and all the other stuff that ran afterwards. This is the historical side, and that seems extremely unlikely. Far more likely, as is shown in some of the other records and evidence, he disobeyed his father, got engaged, got caught in a battle, and unfortunately was killed. So now we have no heir. Guinevere the First, she's getting quite old by this stage and beyond childbearing age probably. So the difficulty now is the succession. Very much a situation like all dynasties around the world. And this one reminds quite a bit of Henry VIII because he has to start taking more wives, but we'll get on to that. So next in line now, we've got the brothers, of course, Freoch and Idnith. Next behind that, we've got Medraud and Gwalchmai. Now, it seems at this point, Gwalchmai is more likely to get chosen. We'll come on to that. Medraud seems to have organised Ewan the murderer to try and wipe out this side of the family, so they then become the successors. And during this plot, Idnith is taken out, so he's murdered. He's gone. These guys did survive, and Meurig is still going. Like I said, the succession method, you don't wait till death. Meurig is going to keep running the kingdom. Arthur can do the running around in the armies and all that, which is why I think maybe King Arthur's kingship as such comes later, and why it's confusing. He's the high commander of the armies, but his father's the king, so it's a little bit confusing. Although you'll find the Brutes of England, he does get appointed as King of Glamorgan and Gwent at some point. So these two are in line. My view then, it's a bit personal, is Arthur's think he's getting a bit older. His son has died. Anyway, so he marries again, and he marries another Guinevere, Guinevere II. And she seems to then have found, this is where confusion comes in, another Medraud, another Morgan. And those two have had some sort of affair and absconded for whatever reasons. Reminds me a little bit of the other Boleyn girl story with the English royal family. So she's preferred to go with him. Unfortunately for her, Arthur takes a bit of a dim view on this, and he doesn't call off his hunting dogs when they're tracking them down. So those two end quite quickly and abruptly. Now, my view then is Arthur's probably thinking, oh, to heck with this. The old wife is causing all sorts of trouble about the fact he's remarried. She's not happy. He's getting grief. His heirs have died. His wife's been a disaster. Gwalchmai will take him on as Edling, or the heir apparent, who will take over on the death of Arthur. Now, this is all well and good, except it does seem to cause a problem in Medraud. Now, some people say that Arthur married before this happened. My view is Arthur, it seems more likely to me that Arthur put Gwalchmai in charge before he took his third wife, and this will explain later the date of Morgan's birth being a little bit later. But we'll come on to that in a second. Don't want to things are confused enough already. So, of course, with this situation, we also have the pestilence then, 555 to 562, a comet in 562. So there's a slight mismatch of dates there, or something I also think is that the comet might have been the end of the pestilence, and that hit at the end. Maybe the heat destroyed whatever was causing the trouble and cleared the country. But either way, Medraud has now taken charge of Britain, it would seem, and he's taken allies from Angles and Saxons and various other types of people and made a big army. And Gwalchmai is going to have to fight to be the successor of Arthur too. So slightly different to the Wilson books, where he has Gwalchmai supporting Arthur. I think it's the other way around. I think Arthur, although he's getting on a bit, has to come back and actually support Gwalchmai. The story goes that the first battle was on Longborth, which is a beach you can see in West Wales, and this is where Geraint died, and his stone to mark his death was recorded at 562, so it ties in with that. Medraud is now on the run. He has his own family and people to collect, so he's got to move quickly. He ends up going through central Wales and eventually gets trapped at Camlan, which is the Crooked Glen in mid-Wales, and this is where the next battle takes place, famous Battle of Camlan. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes, and both the brothers, fighting on opposite sides obviously, because I think they're contesting for the throne, both killed. So now we have a disastrous situation where all the potential heirs have gone. All we've got left is this strange, interesting character, Freoch, who seems to be hanging around the whole time, mysteriously. And of course, Meurig, is still alive at this point. He seems to have gone all the way on to 570. And some people even think he outlived Arthur. Although that seems unlikely, because there is some sort of coronation towards the end of his, if not reign, his sort of generalship and stewardship. So Arthur really, although he's getting on now, he's probably 60s, takes a third wife. I'm not sure if she's still on the scene or not, but he's now got Guinevere the Third. And fortunately for everybody, they have a son, Morgan. And just to make sure, they have a couple more sons. Gwaedneth, who comes a bit later. Ithael also becomes king at some point. And Morgan becomes married to Elwiri. And this is the way the dynasty continues. Now, the difficulty we have, do you remember we mentioned Ithdid right at the beginning of the story? The problem is, when Arthur dies... Arthur. Morgan is still very young. This is the reason why I put his birth date a little bit later. If Arthur died in 579, as is backed up with some of the Kentucky lectures and other stories, seems a very feasible date to me, then I would make Morgan born much later, which would make him about 12 years old at the death of Arthur. Either way, whether you go with a 562 or a 567 or a 569 birth, Morgan is considered too young to take on probably Frioch. So some sort of secret was put together whereby Ithdid, and this is where he comes back into it, took the body of Arthur and hid it in the cave that you can see in Coed y Mystery. When he's buried the body there, they have to wait for 2 years, and they have to keep things quiet, because at this point the kingdom is very weak. There's been at least 2 invasions. We've had the campaigns in the north. We've had terrible civil war. There's been the pestilence, the comet, the catastrophes. The country is in no state to suddenly have a young boy taking over and trying to keep this empire, what's left of it, together. So the body is hidden, and after a few years, Morgan is considered old enough, and this is where Frioch comes back into the story after all this time, and it seems the first thing, or one of the first things that Morgan does, is promptly kill the by now aging Frioch, and Morgan guarantees the dynasty. The difficulty is, there's not an awful lot of the dynasty left, and that is when we see the next stage of the Game of Thrones, when the Kingdom of the North will start to become a big part in this, because they now refuse to respect the primacy or the supremacy of South East Wales. And as the High King is an elected position, it's time then for them to take some control. And we move on to that in another story of the Welsh Game of Thrones.